Hello, techies. Welcome to the Tech Ties Africa podcast, where we'll bring you the latest stories on tech and startups in Africa. Catch us every Thursday at 10 a.m. WAT on techtiesafrica.podbean.com. Let us know what you think by giving us feedback in the comments or on our socials. Now, on with the show. Hello, and welcome back to the Tech Ties Africa podcast. I'm Kelvin, and I'm here with Karen. We would be talking about a couple of topics today from the African tech scene. Karen, how are you doing today?
Hi, Kevin. It's cold here. We're starting to see the rains coming in, but really excited to be here.
Yeah, the rains have also started here, especially in the night, but it's not yet cold. It's still hot over here, so I think we need a lot more rain, and then maybe the weather starts to drop. So let's see how that goes. So today we'll be talking about a couple of things. We'll talk about Decagon's pivots in their business model. We'll talk about Nigeria's move to pass a bill to require social media companies to have a physical office space and a couple of other interesting topics. First, we'll start with Decagon. So Decagon used to be a startup that helped people learn tech skills, and they created a model where you could take a loan to pay gradually for your learning. And after this, they would connect the students with job opportunities when they pass through their curriculum. But it seems they struggled with this model because people were not paying, people were defaulting, and the cost of learning was quite high, especially when you consider the purchasing power in Nigeria. But they ran into some issues, and then they have now just made a complete pivot into connecting people that are trying to gain admission to master's programs abroad. So I was quite surprised when I saw this. I thought they were going to pivot to something else, kind of like we saw with Andela a couple of years ago. Andela had a similar model where they would train developers and connect them to companies that want to help build some software solutions. So they were working as an outsourcing company. And then they made a pivot to stop doing the training and just hire senior developers that are ready to work. And they also laid off a lot of their junior developers. So I thought the pivot would be something similar to that, but they have completely gone to something else entirely.
I think we had talked about this previously, where we're seeing ed tech companies in Africa having a bit of a hard time with business models. And I understand that their business model was even more difficult because they were giving student loans and graduates had to then pay afterwards. But when you look at the unemployment rate in Nigeria, they're quite high. And so someone has gotten their education, but will they get the employment that they require in order to pay back this loan? I guess that's one way where the business model was a bit flawed. And I also think that the depreciation of money that we've been seeing may have caused even more of a problem, but that's besides the point. I'm interested to see how this new model will play out because there's also an influx of international tech experts or tech professionals. And India seems to have taken quite a big chunk of that. And so this brings you in competition because I think they have perfected the export of tech professionals as a country. So this is putting them in competition with that. And I'm waiting to see how that plays out in terms of creating those opportunities. And I don't know if you've also seen that ALX has also kind of pivoted
Yeah.
and they are also doing the university placements and stuff like that. So I really don't know how it's going to work out because number one, the job market and the amount of talent that is already being churned is quite high. And so that's a big competition. And the question is, how will their infrastructure and the expertise that they have at this point play out into allowing them to focus on this new business model? Because they're used to being trainers, they're not used to placing people. So I'm interested to see how they're going to do that in a way that doesn't make them just another agent that is
Yeah.
helping people go outside of the country. So it's challenging.
Yeah, it's a challenging space, and you did touch on the depreciation of the naira playing a role.
Yeah.
And one of the things I thought about when I came across this news was, could it be an opportunity for more local investments versus foreign investments? Because when you raise in dollar and then you have to generate profits that match that dollar, and you are operating in a place where the currency is constantly fluctuating, is almost like a constant uphill task to become profitable. So while they might be doing well in naira, when you convert it back to the dollar, which they raise the money in, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Because say you raised money in 2023, the value of naira at the moment is almost two times what it was in 2023. So how do you meet up? So maybe it's an opportunity for more local investments. But I guess the broader story is more on, we are beginning to see these edtech skill training programs pivot to something else. So quite interesting, and we would see how they handle it. Andela seems to be doing fine at the moment with outsourcing talent or senior talent. So we'll see how this model works for Decagon.
Yeah, I'm also interested to see how they differentiate themselves. So yeah, looking forward to more on that. Still in Nigeria, we've seen you guys have a bill that is being debated at the moment, and it just passed its second reading, and it's mandating that social media platforms have offices in the country, and also for bloggers to have offices within the country, and also to register into associations. Maybe they're trying to bring in more oversight. So the House of Representatives in Nigeria is still debating, and we might have to see companies like Facebook and Instagram coming and creating offices in the country, which I personally think is a good idea
Yeah.
because of the numbers that Nigeria represents. And I think it will also create more employment within the country. It will probably give you guys more of a voice in terms of things like ad revenue and all these things that we usually see African countries have a lesser size of the pie. For some reason, we always get cheated out of some of these things. It really annoys me. For example, I've been using Pinterest for a very long time, and sometimes they will release a really cool feature, and it will be almost everywhere else other than African countries and a few Asian countries and third world countries. Perhaps it's because we don't generate as much revenue as these other countries do, but I think having offices in the country allows better lobbying for African creatives moving forward. I do have an issue with the bloggers side of it. I have some issues with it, but I want to hear from you first before I go on a tangent.
So in theory, it's a good idea. Even in practice, it's a good idea. There are positives, like you mentioned, with these big social media companies having fiscal offices here. The reason why Nigerians would be skeptical about it is the government's way of responding to issues sometimes. I'll put it like that. So let's say there's an issue, maybe they want a post taken down, and maybe the social media company is not responding to that. I mean, we have seen this before. They would just go ahead to the office and arrest whoever is there. We saw this recently with the Binance saga that played out throughout last year. They
Mm.
invited these guys for a meeting. And they were invited for a meeting, and then they ended up being arrested and just held for months. So that's the side with Nigeria that is hard to get past. The potential to just arrest somebody without too much due process in some cases. So that's the part that makes me very skeptical about it. I've seen it play out too many times. I want them to at least maybe have something that addresses how they do conflict resolution that doesn't resort to just arresting everybody.
That's a very interesting look at it. And wow, I didn't look at it in that manner. I was just looking at it in terms of government just wanting a lot of control on online content. But I wanted to hear your opinion on having bloggers registered and have offices. And I'd like to understand, first of all, what is it that they are calling a blogger, right? When you look at the internet right now, there's a lot of information that is not well verified, right?
Yeah.
As a journalist, there are certain things that you learn when you are reporting the news that help ensure that everything that is being put out there is factual and is beneficial to the people who will read it. Now, whether actually happens in practice, I don't know, but in theory, that is something that is behind the training of journalists.
Yes.
But now that everyone is becoming a journalist in their own right, there's a lot of misinformation that is happening and a lot of content that is being put out there that is really not well verified. That I think needs a little more clarity in terms of what can be done to reduce that on online platforms. I don't know that a government on its own can fix that. I think that can be fixed by platforms. The issue of saying that all bloggers have to be registered, my question is, what is the definition of a blogger? Because there's a mom who just loves being a mom and blogs about being a mom. Is that considered a blogger who needs to be registered?
Yeah, you make a fair point there. When I read about the bill, I also saw that the Senate president didn't agree with the blogger side, and he wants that side to be reviewed a bit more because it could lead to some witch hunting. Kind of similar to what I touched on the social media offices. In terms of how do you define a blogger, I think there's still a very fine distinction between a journalist and a blogger or content creator, as the case may be. A journalist has a journalistic process that they go through before putting something out. I'm a content creator, just creates content. Okay, I think it would be good to create something about maybe a cooking recipe, and I write down from my personal experience how I go about cooking this particular dish and put it out there. That's a very different process from the journalistic process. So I believe there's still a fine line there. So everybody that creates content that is not going through that journalistic process is I like to use more of the content creator term, but yeah, a blogger. And then the journalists, they talk to sources, they fact check, they put these articles together and then they publish it with registered or recognized publishers as well. So I think more of this, especially with Nigeria, is a lot of blogs that do like celebrity gossip and are always trying to put out scandalous gist on celebrities. And if they have physical offices, Nigerians are very interesting people. So that may not work out well. So I don't agree with that part for having physical offices for bloggers.
Yeah. And especially also government bloggers in terms of their security. When we were having Mandamano in Kenya, when we were all like coming together and speaking about issues, and even until this time, we've seen a lot of our government bloggers being abducted and disappearing. So you wonder, if you know exactly where I am, although even without knowing exactly where they are, these guys were being picked up from their homes. I am glad that your Senate is seeing that there might be an issue with that in terms of also protecting the lives of these people who sometimes speak up against the government itself. And you cannot then go on a campaign that is biased towards them.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary that we go down this route. Let bloggers do their thing, let journalists do their thing, and let's leave it at that. I don't think there's a need for that. The social media companies having a physical presence has its advantages. So that's I look forward to, and especially look forward to how they do conflict resolution. That part would be good to have for the social media companies. Moving on, Indeed restructures employee salaries. So before I talk about Vindi's, a lot of companies have been letting go of employees in the last 3 to 4 years. We have seen this in the global space with companies like Facebook and Google, but also in the local space as well. So a lot of startups are letting go of people. We talked about Max.ng a couple of weeks ago, and this week is Vindy's. But their approach to doing this, they have laid off a couple of people in the last few months, and now they are restructuring salaries. So they unilaterally slashed people's salaries, and they want to gradually increase it month by month until it gets back to the full salaries in December. Their reason for this is they are trying to slow down their burn rate and make the company sustainable. But I don't know about this particular approach. I'm imagining myself in a company, I'm earning a particular figure, and then my salary is unilaterally slashed to maybe 20% of that. And I have to now start to get used to that until December. What is even the guarantee that it gets increased month by month until December? I don't know how I feel about that. So I'm interested to hear what you think about this.
um, employee issues really get to me. I'm getting to the place where I'm thinking I'll move to HR, but if this writing thing doesn't go my way, as we were just talking before we started the show with AI and everything, I might just go to HR. But first of all, I would like to take a moment to understand that we are in an economic downward spiral, right? A lot of companies are feeling it, especially for startups where burn rate can be quite high, especially in the logistics field, which we talked about last week, and how logistics in Africa is just a monster that no one has yet fully understood how to navigate. And so I completely understand that. But I'm thinking that you have a lifestyle that's based on a certain amount of money, right? And then you wake up one morning and you can hardly afford that lifestyle. And I'll say this because I think I told you I resigned from my job in December.
Yeah,
And the reason for that was some of the money decisions that were being made. It was one of the things that led to my decision, where you wake up one morning and perhaps you were in office but you forgot to punch in, but you've been in office all day, you've been writing emails, and without communication, without letting us know that this was the direction that the company was going to take, you'd wake up one morning and 20,000 shillings, which I think is equivalent to 250,000 naira, has just been removed from your salary.
yeah,
Nobody discussed it with you, and they're just these decisions that startups are making, and I think they're making them from the place of panic, because the projections that they had for the company, they are seeing that they may not be able to meet them. And so I fully understand that side, but also I think it speaks to the future of work. Job security is completely dead. We're moving into the Western way of working, where the notion of one job may not make sense for most people anymore, because most companies will probably not be able to afford you full time and pay you a salary that is able to sustain you. And I think as Africa, we need to start realizing this reality and start seeing how we can formulate our lives to work in that way. Because I think as we go forward, hopefully the economy will start to stabilize and get better. And then we will see whether the capacity to be employed by one person and just comfortably be in employment will happen. But at this point, we're seeing more and more people realizing that the side hustle thing just has to become a reality for us, because relying on one space of employment is just becoming a lot more unrealistic. And I also think that companies that are saying to their employees that you can only work for us are doing a major disservice to people. Because if you can't
yeah,
afford to keep me comfortably, then you should allow me to have something that doesn't affect my time with the company, but allows me to create enough money to have a quality life. So I think it's a conversation we need to start having more of. I think in Kenya, everyone has a side hustle. I don't know if that's the same with Nigeria. Even if I am working in the bank, I have a shop somewhere.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same in Nigeria.
Yeah, and I think we need to make it clear even to the generation that is now starting to work that thinking of multiple streams of income as an employee, it can no longer be only as business people. As employees, we need to start figuring out multiple streams of income for ourselves.
Yeah, you make some solid points there.
Yeah.
So another point that I would like to touch on is HR. You did talk about going into HR, and I feel, especially when I see like large layoffs, for example, in this case, 120 employees were laid off in January, and then now they are reducing salaries as well. That's 120 people that have lost their job. So if you can do the work with 120 people less, why were those 120 people hired in the first place? For me, that's like a broader issue that we are seeing with hiring. It seems hiring is broken because we see these companies continue to function without these people that have been laid off. So why were they hired in the first place? That means there needs to be some more thought into hiring and finding a balance between the people you have and the work that is available to be done, and not overshooting that, because that's 120 people with 120 families and things like that. And we're seeing this around the world. It's better if they were not hired in the first place. For me, maybe they will be hired somewhere else. If they were not in your company, they will definitely be with someone else. So when you have now put them in a situation, they have gotten used to being here, contributing their value, and then now they have to lose their jobs or lose their income, a significant portion. There needs to be some conversations with hiring itself. That's my thought on it.
You kind of blew my mind. Oh my God, that's very true. Oh wow. Man, that's true. All right. So let's go to transfers. GTCO's Habari Pay is expanding its push into fintech with new licenses, and they've boldly stated that transfers will be the future. So I think we saw GTCO start by having this whole bouquet of services that it was offering under Habari. And then when they realized that they were having an issue with capturing consumers and gaining customer loyalty, they kind of focused a little bit with Habari Pay. And now we're seeing that they are starting to bring in some licenses to help them operate even better and to help them compete with companies like Flutterwave, Paystack. So they now have the payment solution service provider and switching licenses so that they can be able to compete better with fintechs that are doing really well. We talked about MoneyPoint a couple of weeks ago, and those are some of the people that they want to compete with, and they're hoping that they can bring in cheaper and faster transactions for businesses and for individuals in Nigeria. I really want to hear what you think in terms of transfers being the future in Nigeria and the main challenges that probably need to be solved before we can see someone take up a huge chunk of the market. So I really want to hear your thoughts.
So I believe it was last week we talked about the Access Bank's play with tap to phone.
Yeah.
They are betting on that. So I took some time to like read on it, and basically the problem the tap to phone is trying to solve is that getting POS devices are expensive, so not everybody is able to pay. So instead of getting a different device just for payments, you can turn your smartphone into a payments terminal using the NFC technology that a lot of cards have these days to do the tap to pay. So I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. And then over the last week, I went to buy engine oil for my generator. And when I wanted to pay for it, the person I bought from used a POS device and then just tapped my card. That's the first time I actually used this tap technology, even though it was tapped to POS. And it prompted me to enter my PIN, and then I enter my transaction PIN, and then the payment was processed. So I was like, okay, cool. It's not yet full contactless payment, but it's less contact. Same with the tap to phone. And we are seeing like most of the players are betting on this for the future of payments. GTCO and their bank is GT Bank, so I use GT Bank. They are betting more on transfers. And in Nigeria, transfers can be fast a lot of the time. But when it doesn't work, it doesn't work. A lot of the time, you can't tell when the transfer would go. With a POS device, for example, when you put in your card, you enter your PIN, once it works, it works. You get the receipt and the person gets the money. But with transfers, on the other hand, you could make a transfer and the person doesn't get it, but you receive a notification that the money has been sent. And then you're now in this gray area where the person has not received the money, but the money is not in your account for a period of time, especially during times when the network for some reason just doesn't work. There's that uneasy space of, okay, I've sent it, I haven't seen it, and you're wondering, did it actually go, and things like that. That's the issue with transfers. So for GT Bank, it looks like they are now trying to solve this with Habari Pay, because you have to solve that to be able to be like transfers will be the future of payments. If they do solve that, then I can see where there will be massive competition with transfers being a major player. But they have to fix that problem. A lot of Nigerians are used to doing transfers, but when you say you want to bet on it as the future of payments, then you have to fix that fundamental issue with transfers that make them not so reliable. If they become more reliable, then yes, it will be interesting to see how they compete with Money Points, OPay, and others.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that bank transfer fees are ridiculously high. And I don't know if this happens in Nigeria, but for example, if I set up standing orders where every month a certain amount of money is removed from your account and sent to a certain place, every time it bounces, you're charged. Setting up the transfer comes at a charge. It's really expensive and they're usually quite exorbitant. So, for example, if a transfer doesn't work, you're charged 2,500 Kenya shillings, which I think is about 25,000 naira. I'm not sure. Because it's about $20
Okay.
that you're being charged for a transfer that perhaps did not go through. Maybe you hadn't yet put in enough money or something of the sort. It bounces and you're charged. The transfer itself is quite expensive, between $5 and $50 for just transferring money from one account to the other. And I think that that is where we see digital transfers or fintechs beating out banks, because it's a lot cheaper to do it as opposed to going through the bank. And so I don't know if that is something that could come into play for Nigeria, but I know that that's something that comes into play for Kenya. We had spoken previously about a platform that the Kenya Bankers Association is trying to set out or grow, because it has been there for a long time. And one of the things with this platform is its transfer charges are a lot lower than going through the bank and doing transfer from one bank to another, or an RTGS. Also, what you said about the speed, an RTGS, for example, takes 2 days. Like, what? Why? 2 days,
Nah, I'm not waiting 2 days. Come
right?
on.
And if it's over the weekend, it's not happening. You have to wait for a
Wow.
weekday.
Really?
Yes, when you go to traditional banks and you do something like an RTGS transfer, it's going to take, it's called T plus one. So the day that you drop it plus one more day, then it can reflect on the other person's side. And even if it does reflect on the other person's side, there's a possibility that they may not be able to access that money until they show their source of funds. So where is this money coming from?
Yeah,
And if it's a weekend, central bank is closed, so you cannot transfer the money. So if you transfer the money, for example, on Friday evening, you can expect that money to go out on Tuesday.
I
So
see.
it's ridiculous, the time and the cost of it. So those are issues that better transfer systems in the fintech world will solve, and banks themselves may need to find a way to solve that. So I don't know if that's a play in Nigeria, but it's definitely a play in Kenya.
So I think the fees you talked about are quite high in Kenya. It's not the same in Nigeria. It's not even close. In Nigeria, let's say you're trying to transfer 100,000 naira from one bank to another bank. The fee you would pay, at least for GT Bank, I don't know about other banks because I almost exclusively use GT Bank or GTCO in this case. The fee on that will be like 50 naira, and then you get an additional VAT fee, 2 point something naira. And so in total, in fees, you're paying 53 naira. That's not up to $1.
Ah,
So when you say $20 or $25, I'm like, really? For transfer?
and that's because it has bounced. It hasn't even been transferred.
Yeah, and also if it bounces for some reason, your money is returned, but those fees are also returned as well.
Huh?
Yeah, if for some reason the receiving bank can't, well, receive it, the money is sent back to your account and the fees are also sent back to your account.
Wow.
So the 50 naira and the 2 naira will be sent back to your account. So for me, it's like transfers are quite cheap. You literally get value for your money because you only pay when the money gets to the recipient. But if it doesn't get to the recipients, then it gets reversed and the fees also get reversed. So that's how it works in Nigeria. So I don't think fees will be like a blocker in Nigeria, but if GTCO is looking to make a play in Kenya, then that's something that they definitely have to think about. Oh yeah, moving on. As it's customary with us, we always talk about M-Pesa somehow. So M-Pesa is in the news again, but this time not for positive reasons. They are experiencing a decline in their market share, it seems, with Ethel money capturing more and more of the pie. I think it's why it's made the news this time is because it seems their market share has been dropping consistently since 2024, and now it's gone from 97% sometime in 2024 to now it's at 91%. And again, they still hold a lot of the market share, but when you continuously experience a decline month over month, quarter over quarter, then you need to like have some conversation about it as a business. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts, especially being in Kenya down there. How is it with M-Pesa and Airtel Money? Because I was also reading that it seems like you can switch between both. So what do you think about this?
Honestly, I'm really happy for Airtel because they've been fighting this battle for really long. Their adverts are very funny because they attack Safaricom, and it's a really fun war that they have. But what I will say is this: I'm really glad that Airtel is starting to take a chunk out of Safaricom because I think what is happening is because it is such a monopoly, it takes advantage of people when it comes to pricing. That's just my opinion. And some of the charges can be quite costly. And then with Airtel, it's a lot cheaper. And the move that we saw was first people started buying Airtel for calls. So they use the Airtel SIM cards to make calls because it's a lot cheaper, but they cannot discard Safaricom because the network is better. The infrastructure that they have put in place is a lot better. And there was a time a couple of years ago where there was a discussion of allowing Airtel to use Safaricom infrastructure to get better network across the country, and it brought a big issue. So I don't think it ever happened. But we're also seeing them now starting to put up their boosters and have better connectivity across the country, including outside the major towns, because they first concentrated on major towns. So that was the first move that people made. So Airtel reduced its call prices and its internet prices as well, so low that people moved to them for that reason. Then they created the capacity for me who has an M-Pesa number to send money to an Airtel number. And that I think is where the game changed. because as an Airtel provider, I'm able to receive money from a Safaricom user. And I think now we're seeing a lot more people. Over the last few months, I've had more people ask me to transfer money to Airtel and not to Safaricom than I have in my entire life. So the fees is where they're really capturing the audience because they are ridiculously affordable. And that is the game that they've been playing with Safaricom. They've been playing a pricing game. That's been their strategy. And I think it's starting to work because first they got everyone with an Airtel SIM card. That's the first game they played. Let's have everyone having a Safaricom SIM card, but also an Airtel SIM card because it's cheaper to make those calls. And then let's allow them to just transfer money to Airtel, even though they're getting it from a Safaricom number. And I think that's where the game just changed for them.
Yeah, very, very interesting long-term play that they have made there. Competition, especially in capitalism, is always good. When you have a monopoly like that, you don't always get the best value. So it's good that Airtel is giving them some competition. I guess we'll see what Safaricom's response would be to this.
Yeah, but I also think other than Airtel, we're also seeing people move to other fintechs. It's slow, but it's happening. So, like Flutterwave, I think they started their operations in Kenya. They brought in offices in Kenya. I'm not sure when, but I believe they did. And they're starting to get a good amount of market size that's moving to them. And so we're also seeing people slowly, very slowly moving from Safaricom and trying out the other fintechs that are coming into the market. So I think other than just Airtel, although Airtel is the biggest competitor that they have, we're also seeing other smaller fintechs take up a bit of their market when it comes to transfer of funds.
I see. That is good. Yeah, that's all for this episode of the podcast. Karen, it's always great to speak with you and talk about all things tech in Africa.
100%. Yeah. Always really fun.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Tech Tides Africa podcast. Remember, leave a comment or share with your friends. We'll see you next Thursday at the same time and place you get your podcast. Until then, stay well.